Kristen Noe, our last presenter, the first-year master's student here at DU, and she's studying music theory. She's received her bachelor's degree in music from Virginia Tech, as well as her Master of Education. Krista presented at the Music Theory Society of the Mid-Atlantic Conference last spring on a paper she co-wrote with Scott Hannenberg titled Three Compound Meter Grooves and Recorded Popular Song 1949 to 2014. Her areas of interest are within popular music, specifically the genres punk and country. Today she'll present her paper titled Rednecks and the Red Scare, How Anti-Communism in America Impacted the Genre of Country Music. Let's welcome me in. Join me in welcoming Kristen.
All right. Today I will be examining the stereotypes of country music and how they came to be. Research has been done on finding political sentiments within country music on both sides of the spectrum and on U.S. political history. However, little research has been done on how the political climate and country music interact to create negative stereotypes. The research addressing the negative view of country music does not reveal the whole picture if it does not address the root of these viewpoints. By finding the root cause, there can be a fuller, more nuanced conception of country music. Country music became associated with negative stereotypes because its populist roots became mixed with anti-communism or anti-leftist propaganda of the latter half of the 20th century. This people were weakened by defining populism, how this appears in country music, and then go on to discuss the different viewpoints people have of country music. Finally, we will take a look at the political landscape of the United States while comparing this to the rise of the genre and the viewpoints of the general public. Next. Before being able to look at populism in country music, there needs to be a definition of populism as a political movement. In his article From McCarthyism to the Tea Party, Interpreting Anti-Leftist Forms of U.S. Populism in Comparative Perspective, Richie Savage discusses the history of the term populism. The term derives from the People's Party, formed by farmers in the 1890s who felt they weren't being represented, and today it can be used to describe either side of the political spectrum. On the left, populism can be represented by labor unions and cooperatives, and on the right, there's the Tea Party and McCarthyism. The common denominator is that populism focuses on the people and creates an enemy, such as the bourgeoisie or the communists. Next slide, please. Now turning our attention to how populism is represented in country music, the genre itself is based on dancing, an inherently communal act. Jocelyn Neal uses theoretical analysis to show how country music is impacted by dance culture. In her article, she shows that for most country music, the actual music is secondary to the dances, and most hits are influenced by common meters that are useful for dancing. This connection is important because dance traditions form within communities that populism holds up, and country music is therefore influenced by populist values on a more musical level. Turning our attention to lyrics of country music, Meyer finds that a crucial aspect of country music is advocating for the common man. Many songs explicitly praise the working class for their contributions to society, and their struggles are, quote, frequently blamed on big business or big government, end quote. To illustrate his point, Meyer points to songs such as If That Ain't Country by David Allan Coe, Parkland by Willie Nelson, and Shuttin' Detroit Down by John Rich. Bill C. Malone also claims that country music is found where common working class people gather. In an interview conducted by Cecilia Ticci, he discusses how he teaches his class on Southern culture, and he always encourages students to go out to local bars and jams and see what people are actually doing and playing. It provides a much broader view than country radio hits ever could. To take a more explicit look at leftist populism in country music, Elias Ben Nah gives good examples of these ideals in Johnny Cash and Dolly Parton. With leftist populism representing the fight for various minority groups, quote, Cash's efforts to disrupt coded racism acquires a distinctly instructive quality. The Man in Black image, therefore, not only teaches audiences about U.S. values, but it also serves as a reminder for how these efforts remain unfulfilled, end quote. As for Parton, her song 9 to 5 is, quote, evocative of orthodox Marxism, end quote, with lyrics such as, they just use your mind and never give you credit, and it's a rich man's game no matter what they call it. Furthermore, Parton's stage persona embraces the idea of gaudiness with ties to her poor Appalachian roots, and this allows her to be relatable to her audience even as she gains more and more success. Outside of Parton and Cash, Nancy P. Riley discusses how older country artists' leftist values have influenced genres far outside country. In her article, Country Music Doesn't Have to Suck, she examines how country music influences the underground punk scene in Chicago, a genre well known for upholding leftist populism. Therefore, we can see that leftist populism is extremely prevalent in country music. Looking at leftism more broadly within the genre, Parton and Cash are big proponents of socialist populism. Furthermore, Parton has also created a safe haven for queer people with her music and her persona. Going farther back in time, Gregory Reich shows how country music of the 1930s were in fervent support of President Franklin Roosevelt and his National Recovery Administration, the NRA. In his chapter, The NRA Blues, Commercial Music, Country Music, and the New Deal, Reich discusses 4 musicians and their various songs that support President Roosevelt and his socialist programs to ease the Great Depression. First was Milton Brown with the song Fall in Line with the NRA. Next, the Light Crust Doughboys with On to Victory, Mr. Roosevelt. Third, fiddler John Carson rewrote his song The Honest Farmer to support FDR. And finally, the Allen Brothers released the New Deal Blues, which, despite the title sound, is in support of the New Deal. Based on Rice's research, leftist values in country music date back to its conception, but that is not the general perception of country music today. Today, the general perception of country music is that it is a conservative genre that is made and listened to by backwards-thinking white people. In her book, Rednecks, Queers, and Country Music, Nadine Putz explores this stereotype. Her claims that this started because the genre was once called hillbilly music, a term that is now derogatory. Furthermore, middle-class white people want to set themselves apart from the lower class, and so they exclude their music. Quote, a taste declaration like anything but country appears first and foremost as a gesture of social exclusion, end quote. Putz supports these claims with specific instances of discrimination against the poor and working class of the South. Her first example she uses is the Foo Fighters dressing up as stereotypical hillbillies in a music video. And that's the picture that's featured on the screen. About the video, Putz says, quote, and that is consistent with the way these images circulate in American culture, in a muddled blur of stereotypes that also at times includes fundamentalist, Christian, racist, and homophobic elements as markers of provincial white working class identity, end quote. The Foo Fighters later recreate their stereotypical looks to counter-protest the Westboro Baptist Church protesting their concert. By mocking the church in this way, they imply that working-class white people hold the same values as the church. Putz also explores the extra-musical perception that most people believe that poor people are voting Republican against their own interests, an idea that is called the Kansas thesis. However, this idea has been debunked several times. Putz ends the chapter saying, quote, mutual aversion between middle class and the working class is a structural given, end quote, and that disliking country music is a signifier to disassociate the speaker from, quote, the bad whites. Malone finds similar sentiments in students who take his class. His claim is that many of them associate country music with the atrocities the South has committed, such as slavery. While Putz focuses on general assumptions, Meyer looks to the lyrics of country music. After an inspection of many country songs, Meyer finds 6 themes: populism, traditional family values, patriotism, nostalgia, and the genre being primarily white. In this section, we will focus on traditional family values and patriotism because these themes align with right-leaning politics particularly well. Starting with family values, it is interesting because to start the section, Meyer says, quote, country music is characterized by traditional family values where men are men who appear to spend most of their time drinking and catting around and women have babies, end quote. However, he does not provide examples of this and instead turns to look at feminism as a countercurrent in country music. Thus, he believes that his audience is so aware of the stereotype that he doesn't need to explain it, and this shows how synonymous traditional family values and gender roles are to the genre. That being said, I do provide lyrics later in this presentation as examples, but furthermore, in these songs, a man and a woman settle down, get married, and a man man fills the role of protecting, providing, and displaying. Turning to the second point, Meyer shows that themes of patriotism are pertinent in the genre. The songs that Meyer mentions are The Good Times Really Over, The Fighting Side of Me, and Okie from Muskogee, and these are all by Merle Haggard. Peter LaChapelle dives into the last song in his article, Fighting Sides, Okie from Muskogee, Conservative Politics and the Uses of Migrant Identity. Specifically, he goes into detail about how the resounding response to Okie from Muskogee was using the song to support the war in Vietnam. The song paints a picture that good white people fight for their country, and that those who are opposed to the war are effeminate. Even though Okie from Muskogee is the most popular song analyzed in this context, there are many more songs in the genre across the years that support the military and espouse patriotic views, such as Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, The Angry American by Toby Keith, God Bless the USA by Lee Greenwood, and America Will Survive by Hank Williams Jr., and finally, Some Gave All by Billy Ray Cyrus. Based on these examples, it's obvious that it's not unheard of for the genre to be associated with conservative politics, but that has become the overwhelming stereotype. Therefore, we have to explore the history of the United States and the genre to see how this becomes a prevailing sentiment. But first, here are some lyrics. Yeah, that support traditional family values. We have Small Town Southern Man by Alan Jackson, where he falls in love with a small town woman, they get married and settle down, and that's the natural way of life if you're lucky for a small town Southern man. Daddy's Hands by Holly Dunn. They were soft, but they were also hard to steal when I'd done wrong, but there's always love. And finally, Don't Take the Girl. The specific lyric is about how when getting robbed at gunpoint, the man is supposed to protect the woman at all costs. Next slide. These are songs that support patriotism. Right, we have God Bless the USA, where it says, and I'm proud to be an American, or at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died who gave that right to me. And the other songs support similar ideas. Specifically, America Will Survive is particularly interesting. It was written in 2002 as kind of like a response to 9/11, and he says there's no more Yankees and rebels this time, but one united people that stand behind, referencing that there was a split with the Civil War between the rebels and Yankees, but now we're just all Americans ready to fight the new threat. Next slide. And these are the lyrics to Okie from Muskogee, where it says, we don't smoke marijuana in Muskogee, we don't take trips on LSD, we don't burn our draft cards, we don't grow our hair long and shaggy like the hippies out in San Francisco do. Leather boots are still in style for manly footwear, and they don't wear beads or sandals, I guess, like hippies do.
They respect the dean.
And they respect the dean on college campuses. So these are songs that sort of support that idea. All right, so as discussed earlier, country music took on a relatively socialist, leftist stance in the Great Depression, which lasted from 1929 to 1939. Therefore, the shift must have happened after that. Immediately following the Great Depression was World War II. While the war started in 1939, the US did not join until 1941. Moynihan explains how the US and Britain maintained anti-communist sentiments throughout the war, but they were forced to set them aside to defeat Germany and Japan because they are fighting with the USSR, which is the main communist nation at the time. The artists and producers of country music responded to the war effort in the US with fervor. The most important participant, according to Wayne W. Daniel, was the WLS radio station, which aired the National Barn Dance from 1920 to 1960. The National Barn Dance show had a variety of artists, and they supported the war efforts in various ways. For example, they started playing songs such as Soldier's Joy and Soldier Will You Marry Me. They held attractions for the armed forces and their families, and they also grew victory gardens and encouraged their listeners to do the same. The radio station also sold bonds directly to listeners. It was one of the only radio shows to do so. And at live events, the price of a ticket was scrap rubber or metal instead of traditional money, and that went directly to the war efforts. Therefore, in the World War II era, country music became political and in favor of the war. Once the war ended, the US took the world stage and, quote, returned to their normal anti-leftist dispositions, end quote. They became the anti-communist superpower, and this led to the Cold War, which lasted from 1945 to 1989. Country music also adopted the anti-communist mindset that a majority of Americans had at the time and produced their music accordingly. As Kevin Fontenot describes it, the genre, quote, reinforced plain folk ideology. And this is in line with the populism ideals that I discussed earlier in the presentation, but now the music takes on specifically anti-USSR sentiment. Many of the songs were written to criticize or denounce the USSR, communism, and atheism. Examples include They Locked God Outside the Iron Curtain, The Rednecks of Cards, and I'm No Communist. Later in the Cold War, the music changed to focus on America and polarization that was occurring here. This is where songs like Okie from Muskogee and The Fighting Side of Me come into play, because the Okie from Muskogee was written in 1969. The Cold War eventually ended, but the patriotic side of country music continues into the present day. As we have seen, country music, past and present, is a nuanced genre that holds a plethora of political viewpoints. It stems from populist roots and has conservative and socialist branches. So how did we get such a one-dimensional view of country music? Country music, as shown above, has been a genre of poor white people, and the working class people face discrimination that they are uneducated and unintelligent, which also leads others to assuming they are bigoted. So throughout the 1900s, the populist roots of country became entangled with anti-communism at the start of World War II. As anti-communism diminished, people began associating the genre with right-wing politics more broadly, particularly the bigotry that can arise within these ideals. This made the middle-class white people distance themselves from the genre because they did not want to be associated with bigotry, and this is reinforced by the Kansas thesis. Other genres did not get this label, despite anti-communism impacting every aspect of American life because they were not associated with the working class. Therefore, the one-dimensional view of country music was created, and people chose not to look deep enough to deny it. In this essay, I have defined populism and how it applies in country music. Then I analyzed American history and compared it to the rise of country music. Furthermore, we saw how this created the stereotype that surrounds country music today. The genre is American music, and being American is being anti-communist. Therefore, the music became aligned with conservative politics and the general public combined, even if it is more diverse. By tracing the rise of country music with American history, it creates a more nuanced view of the genre, and we can begin to dismantle the negative viewpoints surrounding it. More research needs to be done on country music in the 21st century to see how the genre has evolved since then. Specific emphasis should be placed on the rise of patriotism after 9/11 and if this has impacted the genre. Furthermore, a corpus study could help illuminate overall shifts in the political views of the genre. Finally, research should be conducted on people of color in the country music scene to see the contributions that they have made.
Thank you very much, Kristen.
Thank you. Yes.
Did you look at all about the impact of fascism on country music?
I don't know if I focus specifically on fascism. I think that would be a very interesting branch. I am curious to see what that looked like because with specifically looking at World War II, we were fighting fascist Germany, and so we kind of took on opposing that. But I don't know like how it affected the genre. Because like now today there are definitely songs that are very discriminatory against other people. Like just recently, Jason Aldean released "Try That in a Small Town," which seems to advocate for lynchings of people that aren't like him. So like there's definitely this impact that needs to be investigated that I have not done for this presentation.
Well, I think to follow up on that, with the Depression era, fascism was considered a legitimate political movement, and there were American fascists at that time.
Interesting.
So, interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, you focused on, the influence of leftist ideologies
Right, but
on
focusing on
country music at that time. And then you looked at, you spoke of some artists that were a little bit later, Dolly Parton and
Dolly
Johnny
Parton,
Cash.
Johnny
They're
Cash, yeah.
definitely, that is still an older generation of artists. I wonder if you could point to any, evidence of leftist or liberal or leftist economic ideology,
Right.
cultural ideology in country music at the present time.
For sure. So the ones that I can think of, like off the top of my head, are the Chicks. They were recently called the Dixie Chicks, but in response to like just the entire political landscape of the country, they changed their name to the Chicks to kind of, because the term Dixie does come from the Civil War and the South trying to become its own nation to maintain slavery. So they dropped that, which is kind of pointing to like that sort of ideology. Furthermore, the Chicks, they write songs, and this is interesting because like a lot of women in country music have a feminist take that is also like, if you abuse me, I'll kill you, which is like Goodbye Earl, or Independence Day. I believe that's by Martina McBride. Both of those where the women are in abusive relationships, they take matters into their own hand and they kill their husbands. Which is perhaps a more extremist view of feminism, but feminism nonetheless. I think the Chicks, also being a woman band, there's a song called Wide Open Spaces, where the main character in the song is a woman, and she just has to go find her life, and like she like strikes out on her own, and it's like does not need a man to like do anything like that. There's also an artist that I haven't looked at, but many people have recommended to me, named Tyler Childers? Tyler Childers. And I think he's producing music that like kind of like leans more left in the term. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been looking at. Yes.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you began talking about more about female artists current, because there's a long history in country music of female artists who appear to be mainstream traditionalists, right?
Yes.
And yet they're very subtly subversive, and Linda Ronstadt was incredibly subversive, and then became overtly subversive,
right?
Writing so I think that's really interesting. But my question was more about crossover or cross genre right now in country music. Like, I can't remember what it's called. It's a really funny name. I can't remember what it's called. But when country music and hip hop join together, like country rap and style country rap, it's called something.
Hip hop.
Hip hop. Thank you. Like where you're finding that.
That's a really good question. I have not investigated hip hop, and I really should, because that's got to be incredible. Because I don't do a whole lot of hip hop in general or rap, but like I think that could be a really interesting thing, because hip hop and rap come from like the struggles of the Black community, and how that could like the working class includes Black people, but the genre, at least right now in country, is primarily white, and so like combining the two like addresses similar struggles of like we're all lived down by the system. So that could be very interesting to look at for sure.
Yeah, but there's also like strong themes of misogyny,
right?
Xenophobia, and how do those correspond?
For sure. Yes.
So there's a question in the Zoom chat from Norma Happenstein. She'd be interested in hearing the presenters' views on current contexts. Are there similarities or differences now from what was occurring during the emergence?
That's very interesting, and part of the reason in my conclusion I mentioned that more study should be done on current country music is because I did not focus on that. But something that I like to do, I am a Gen Z person, so I am on TikTok. And so I do, something that I do sometimes is I listen to like what just like the average person has to say about the genre that it is today, and there's some really interesting viewpoints that it's extremely right-leaning, especially after 9/11, and that like kind of took over the genre, and like it's being expressed now by Jason Aldean's Try That in a Small Town. So I'd be very interested to like take a look at the popular songs that have come out in the last 20 years and see like if that's true or not. Like on the other hand though, we have artists diving into country music that perhaps we wouldn't expect. Off the top of my head, Lil Nas X and Beyonce. Right, we got Old Town Road in 2018, I want to say, produced by a Black gay man. And Beyonce just put out Texas Hold'em, which I was not expecting, but it's right, it's incredible. And like, so like getting that perspective, and Beyonce already has such an established career that the song became a hit overnight. But people are also saying that that isn't real country music, and that like they're taking like this very purist mindset that she hasn't done country music before and therefore she can't do country music, or even like discrediting her as a Black woman, that there's no way she could possibly do country music. So yeah, there's a very interesting divide happening right now that I think needs to be investigated much further.
The stereotypes that you speak of, they have any influence on the production?
They have to, for sure. Because like, well, if you fall in line with these, that like patriotism is good, then you're gonna put out country music like that, and you definitely want to support that. And on the other hand, like you may want to put out country music to be like, hey, no, you're wrong, and like you end up creating this dialogue that can become very divisive. And I'm curious because I don't look too much into like the producer's side of this, like what producers are looking for and what audience they want to put music out for, and how that influences the artists themselves.
Something that's notable about country music to me is it's the most well-organized commercial genre and has been by a large amount for a long time. So, connecting to your presentation, like the avenues of going from being a musician to making money as a musician are clearer in country music
for sure.
than anywhere else. And yeah, I don't know quite how to tie that in here, but I think it's something to recognize.
Yeah, there's something there, right? Because in theory class you did Long Time Gone by the Chicks, right? And like on there, like I'm going to Nashville to be a star, because that's what you do as a country artist. You go to Nashville and you get recognized. And it's like that's just it. Like it's a very clear avenue. Yeah, I'd be interested to like how that plays in. Yeah.
Tied into that, you can tie into the legalization of these in the 70s, new liberal ideology was dominant.
Yeah.
And then urbanization, internet,
Right.
If you could see that did occur simultaneously with the expansion of markets.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Establish the more capitalist, which is American, as you say.
Absolutely.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Really a lot of ground. I'm very curious about the term country music.
Yeah.
Can be used in a lot of ways.
Oh, for sure.
And so your quote, anything but country,
Yes.
that's people thinking of this in a multiple way. And then when we think, I haven't read anything in the books or the other authors and stuff, but I think they're doing small case studies.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you were going to ground this research in some kind of definition of that.
Yeah.
Would you choose a decade? Would you choose a medium, like radio playlist?
Right.
Would you choose, I guess it would depend partly on when you were talking about.
Yeah, we actually had this conversation.
A couple times about where the line falls between country music and folk music. Folk music includes things that are as far left as you can get.
Right, and so we're talking like Woody Guthrie from the 1930s with his guitar, "This Machine Kills Fascists," and writing "This Land Is Your Land," a very leftist viewpoint of the Great Depression at the time. And so that's definitely like an avenue I want to explore of like, so in the research I've done, they usually just say that country started in the early 1900s, and that's usually when it became like a radio channel, like country music, tune in, but like when did country actually start? And so like I think you have to go back farther, and then like where does folk fall in with this? Is folk its own genre? Is folk just country? And then also bluegrass. I think like that's something, it's like another paper that I want to write in like the next year or two, like to figure that out.
Right, but even now, if you look at Dolly Parton's 95, that was one version of it.
Right.
And then in 2020, she was she's pro-vaccine.
Yeah.
Right? So she was able to change partly because of her intent that she would have to be
Right.
in the stratus of those people who are going to Nashville.
Right.
Right. So where is what I think, depending on the time period you choose to talk about, those boundaries around the country might be different.
For sure. Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know those boundaries either. Yeah.
I hate to stop this conversation, but there is another event today
Yes.
that started at 4, and I don't want to prevent anybody from joining. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here. Thanks so much, Miss, for your assistance.